Good morning, everybody. John Spiokla here for GAI Insights, bringing you the Gen AI news briefing, rating your top news essential, important, or optional, saving you time. We hope making you money. Today, we've got about 7 articles ranging from a review by McKinsey of a bunch of Gen AI activities all the way through some new acquisitions by AMD. All right. This morning, we are going to start off with the ever effervescent Adam Rappaport, AI analyst and tech wizard. As soon as Ankash gives us the article first, I'm out of order here. Okay, Ankash, go for it.
Thanks, John. So the first one that we have for today, as John mentioned, comes from McKinsey, and it talks about how some companies are deriving real results from Gen AI in services.
All right, Adam, where do you put this from our consulting brethren?
I started into this article and I wasn't sure to what extent it was going to be like McKinsey just sort of convincing people to use McKinsey. I was a little wary of that. And straight away, I was like, this is actually a pretty good article. It seems to be making some decent points with some good use cases. It's the kind of thing Tim would want to keep potentially even in an upper back pocket. Making some decent points with some, and so I was thinking I'd call it important. And then it just went on and on and on making use cases. And at a certain point, I almost was overwhelmed by how much they've thrown in here without really a thesis that I could really pull away from it. And it seemed to just be like, death by 1,000 cuts. Let's just continue to show them all of these places where there's all of these ways you can use Gen AI. And I actually just sort of wanted to walk away from it. Honestly, I ended up putting it as optional because I wouldn't want to encourage an AI leader to read through this entire thing just to hear about all of these use cases without really there being so much of like an insight or a thesis that was bringing them all together. So not to say there aren't a ton of good use cases in this article though. And it potentially could be something you want to hang on to.
Okay, so we have an article written about robots that could use a robot to make it shorter. What do you think here, Paul?
I thought it was good because it emphasized 2 themes that we're seeing a lot. I know we're talking a lot of companies. One is that only they get 3% or 5% are actually in production. And 2, that because there's so many use cases, it really is important to think about how you get to scale and really drive benefits, particularly at larger companies here. So I had as important. I think it's representative of where the market is. And I also think it importantly helps leaders who are feeling a lot of pressure from the board and CEO to catch up. And, oh my gosh, we're so far behind because of all these announcements. And this shows that most companies aren't in production.
Yeah, I was also surprised by their number, 11% in production, 11% of companies in production. We have a much lower number in terms of what we're seeing, more in the order of 5. But the other thing, Ankash, if you go down farther, there's also the AI architecture, which I thought was kind of useful, in terms of, how complex it can be. And I also thought some of the thoughts on governance were not bad. This is a reuse thing. This is a point you make a bunch, Paul, which is, you can reuse some of the capabilities you have across functions, across WINS kind of functions. If you go down farther, I still think sorry. Yeah, this looks a little bit like our design with dialogue paper, although I would say not as good, but it goes through like how you think about when the robot takes over. If you keep going down, Ankash, if you keep going down, that would be good. Thanks. Keep going. We have the governance models, not bad. And then keep going down. The architecture model, I think, is below this, which I thought was kind of useful. So I must be thinking of the wrong article. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think there was an architecture.
Okay, sorry. My mistake. It's sorry about that, Ankash. All right, so we got an important.
I guess I could get around, Paul. Like the points you made are all in that top maybe third of the article.
Correct.
Like they make some great points at the top, and then I sort of lost interest. So maybe we could even say that the first half of the article is important or something.
Guys, you have to learn.
Anyway. I think it's important. I think I can be a big skeptic of these kind of things. It's best practice and case study, but that's all we have right now. And so, it's all right. And they make a number of good points. If you're on your game, none of them are going to be that surprising. I take all the surveys at this stage with a grain of salt because they're, as we say in the health and medical study space, they're self-reported.
Sure.
And so I take all of that with a grain of salt in terms of what it means even to be in production. But on the other hand, they're talking about large firms that I'm sure they do work with that are in production across industries, classic case studies that we've talked about forever, customer service and things like that.
Mhm.
So it's good. And I think their prescriptions for governance are reasonable. Their prescriptions for, thinking through transformation instead of just thinking through small edges in productivity is also good.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to give this baby an important. It's amazing how used to we've gotten, how accustomed we've gotten to the fact that this stuff can deliver 10 to 20% productivity improvements. Like it's falling off.
That's nothing. Yeah.
I mean,
we don't care about that anymore.
Yeah, that's real.
Bigger fish.
That's real money, gentlemen. That's real money.
Yeah.
In the famous words of Trammell Crow, how are you and I going to make money? Okay, we got an important on this baby. Ankaj, next.
Okay, the next one that we have is from AMD. So AMD has acquired an infrastructure player called ZT Systems for $4.9 billion. It's trying to amp up its ecosystem play.
Yeah. Tim, what'd you think here? We got AMD spreading its wings, trying to catch our friends at NVIDIA. Keep ahead of Intel.
It's interesting, but I would call it optional. It's an acquisition article. It's a fairly big acquisition, but not earth-shattering these days. $5 billion is not that big a thing. And this is a well-known player in building, feeds and speeds, rack spaces, basically.
Yep.
So that's NVIDIA has been very good at this, at building layered solutions on top of its chips. So because we know, in particular, well, let's say those of us who are interested in hardware and networking know it is much more than just having NVIDIA's Blackwell chips, no matter how good they are. You have to have the right cages, you have to have the right networking infrastructure, you have to have the right server configurations. All that stuff really matters. We're now operating literally at the edge of physics. And so everything from cooling to various kinds of infrastructure in the data center really do make a difference. And so NVIDIA's had a clear lead there in delivering closer to a solution, which is what everybody wants. They just want something, plug in my model and make it run. And so this is AMD, I think, moving in that direction. So not surprising.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about, you get Supermicro, worked with XAI to build the world's largest supercomputer just the other day, about a month ago. Look, I'm fascinated by how packaging, back at the last computer revolution where architectures were up in the air, a lot of these were vertically integrated within an IBM or a Amdahl or somebody like that, right? Or Digital, God rest its soul. But here we've got, outside parties who are doing the packaging, much more of a modular kind of combination. Interesting, in terms of market structure.
Yep.
So we got the big O here. Paul, Adam, any opposition? I'm in a democratic mood. We have one of the conventions going on here in our country, Big O. Okay. Ankaj, next.
I think the only thing notable there, I think it just puts more dust in the road between Intel trying to catch up. So Intel's, scrambling to catch up to AMD.
Yes, the once dominant giant now is
indeed
trying to get up off the tarmac and run. Okay. Next.
The next one comes from Harvey. Harvey has launched a next version of its assistant.
Yeah, fascinating. Harvey, that's my wife's maiden name, by the way. And so I had to sign this to myself because I didn't know you were coming, Paul. So I put this as optional, but you start reading the kind of stuff it can do. My goodness, if you're an attorney and you don't understand this, you look at its ability to, look up cases, review contracts, and just create productivity. Back to our wins framework, man. We predicted that back in September that businesses like this were going to be completely, their economics and their processes were going to completely upended in the next 36 to 60 months. I think we might have been too conservative. I mean, if you're not if you're any kind of a law firm, or you're using, or you have, inside counsel, you just can't afford not to do this stuff. And for wins intensive tasks, that's the words, images, numbers, and sounds, knowledge work. I'm starting to believe that for every 5 people that you have working on that stuff, you need at least one white belt, if not a white belt and a green belt in AI, to make that more productive. And that's somebody who understands the basics, can deliver projects and teach others. So anyway, optional, but man, if you're in the legal profession, absolutely essential.
Yeah,
Yes, well, I am. So, for those who don't know, Manat is an integrated legal and professional services firm. And I would say I agree with optional. The only caveat I would say, John, is I think it's essential. Obviously, I do think these firms are in the crucible very much. Harvey has also been analyzed several times by lots of people, and the results are much more mixed in terms of the actual productivity in an actual law firm. And it's expensive. And there are competitors like Thomson Reuters Co-Counsel and many others. So it's not, so I agree with the general tenor that, you need to be using AI assistants of various types, or you're going to be hosed, basically.
Yeah.
To use a technical term. And, but I think, Harvey gets all the press right now because it was first, and it could be quite good, but and we're in the process of looking at these tools, but they're not cheap. And so there is an ROI factor here, where if you pay too much money, it's cheaper to have a paralegal still.
Yeah. I'm surprised they haven't done more aggressive pricing. That this seems like a market where once you got.
I'm speaking from experience of one and some research, open source research online. So I don't want to make too many statements about what their actual pricing is.
Yeah.
But my experience is it ain't cheap.
All righty.
So 2 things I want to know. I mean, they are definitely one to watch because they've raised $200 million. They're very close to OpenAI, which I think also invested in them. They're going after the wins in the crucible industry. And I believe they at one point were talking about buying a law firm, or were rumored to buy one, or actually bought one. So I think this whole notion that you've got an incumbent coming in on a vendor side with a capability that may also want to integrate into some of these services is another one.
That's what happens. And I will tell you, and John, you're probably more knowledgeable about this than I am as a Harvard Business School type, and you too, maybe even Paul. Because I remember this, I was in one of these .com firms. When your stock becomes that valuable, it's an incredible currency.
Oh yeah.
And the market punishes you if you don't use investment funds to their maximum utility. So if you can't take that money and invest it directly in your company, you do AOL Time Warner. You actually take your unbelievably valuable stock and go buy other things. So it wouldn't be surprising if a company like Harvey went and bought a law firm, because the multiples are such that you get an incredible return in these bubblicious kind of phases.
Yeah, Ankash does note that this is at Harvey's a vendor, and we're reading a page off of a vendor website, so there might be a.
Well, exactly. This is a product announcement. Another reason for making it optional.
The one thing I want to note, which is sort of a segue into the next article as well, is that they're using 2 different models. So they're splitting it out. They have an assist mode and a draft mode. And they say their research indicates using different algorithms and underlying models for specific tasks results in stronger outputs, right? Which is what we're going to expect to be seeing more and more. But this is a really good example of it. Do you train the right thing for the right job, and just have lots of them sort of laser focused on each of the tasks you need to orchestrate them to do.
Yeah.
So not all employees are the same, and not all robots are the same. Is that the headline, Adam?
Well, I think it's a headline also of you want multiple robots, right? And so the thing that's going to be
fine tuning, the next article, right?
Yes, right. The thing I think is going to be challenging for these service companies is they're not used to capital substitution for labor, right? I mean, they're still back in the days, like in the guild days of manufacturing. I mean, a lot of the guilds and the manufacturers that of things like silver and barrels and so forth lost because people were willing to come in with capital and automate the living daylights out of that. I don't think we've seen that aggressive law firm yet, but having lived a lot of my professional career at professional services firms, they generally do not know how to deploy capital. And so if somebody comes along and says, okay, we're going to make this a capital intensive business, we're going to automate the living daylights out of this, you could have a very different kind of law firm. But it's going to take some coherent 4 to 5 year horizon capital investment and redo just the way you redid the creation of silver pots as you went to manufacturing. It's still a guild.
Well, and John, I know we're spending a lot of time on this one. That's why I think some of the startups we've seen come out of Harvard, MIT, and others that are focusing on the multi-language aspect of law, so immigration and everything else, be able to have a much better interface and drafted in Portuguese and Spanish and everything else, maybe a potential very promising area.
Awesome. All right, Ankash, optional. Lots of discussion on the big O. All right.
Okay, the next one comes from OpenAI, and OpenAI has introduced the fine-tuning functionality for GPT-4o.
Yeah, we got some fine tuning for our friends at OpenAI and 1 million free tokens. What do you think here, Adam?
Originally, I rated it as optional. It's nice that it's available, but it's kind of incremental change. But I think it's on this page. If you scroll down a little further on, Coach, there's a chart. Unless I was looking at a different link. Yeah, that one there, and you can and just to give you an idea, the ones at the very bottom of that chart are using traditional RAG with the existing models, where you just have your information and you upload it so that the GPT or whatever can chat about it, in a RAG format. And then as you get into the middle, you have agents that are using these models. But then at the very top, you see these fine-tuned ones, and the very top one there is GPT-4 fine-tuned for this task, which is autonomously fixing bugs. This is one of those benchmarks off GitHub, where as an autonomous agent, effectively, how well can a model do? And it just points to what we were seeing in that last article, right? That fine-tuning these models, especially when you think about a GPT-4o, which is more cost efficient, when you can literally blow all of the other benchmarks out of the water in terms of focused on a specific task and creating a custom model for your business needs. I started to come around to the fact that this might be important for everyone that's tapped into that OpenAI ecosystem, to think about how you start leveraging this capability in terms of enhancing what this tool can do and really starting to build these different functionalities that you need to a really high degree, like better than you could get out there ever with a RAG or even just an agent with one of these models.
Don't tell Alden.
Oh, there's still a place for RAG.
Fascinating. So what do you think here? Tim, where'd you come down on this one?
I think it's optional. Fine tuning is a de rigueur at this point amongst all the models. So OpenAI here is just sort of keeping pace. So it's important. It's an important capability, as Adam discussed, but really for developers, right? I mean, you got to be a pretty serious developer or a firm that has some real desire to fine tune a model, because it's not simple to fine tune it correctly. I mean, they show this example, but I'm sure they fine tuned it themselves or fine tuned it with somebody they really helped. They knew what they were doing. So this is not yet, to your point about guilds, this is a guild process, and it can be very effective, but it's, for the average leader, it's optional for the moment.
Okay, optional. Paul, where were you coming down?
Not optional.
All right. Ankash, the big O, we're going for optional. Next, please.
Okay, the next one comes from Meta. So Meta has a self-taught evaluator that enables LLMs to create their own training data.
All right. Tim, what'd you think of this one? The robot teaching the robot about the robot.
Yeah, I think it's optional for the AI leader. This we've talked many times before about the dearth of good training data and good evaluation capabilities. So this is attacking both, and they're trying to do it using other LLMs. So this is the question is, what's the one that swallows its own tail? There is still lots of questions about how well this will work. This is, the numbers are pretty convincing here. So maybe this will work, and that could be important, but it's just early stages and not entirely clear how well it works at scale. So
All right.
Optional.
We're looking at an optional here. Adam, you good with optional?
Sure am.
Paul?
Yes.
It's funny that I keep thinking about, I'm also going optional, but I keep thinking about manufacturing analogies here, because if you've ever been in a job shop, there are these things called jigs, that help set up or, help you set up something like, let's say you're doing a drill press and you have a part you want to, put a couple holes in with a drill press. Somebody will make a jig out of a piece of wood or plastic or something to position the part, so that you can be more efficient putting the part in and out. That's what these things feel like, right? These are the jigs and, tools, little manufacturing tools that are going to help, because I think it is going to help. It's going to help human evaluators be more productive. So I'm just fascinated by all the little power tools that we're creating and jigs that we're creating to do simple work here. And I think Meta is, go ahead.
John, one thing I liked about the jig analogy is that other people can use it, not knowing all the stuff about the jig. They just grab the jig and then start knowing when to use it. So there's some implicit knowledge in there. You have to develop all yourself.
Yeah, the big issue here is when you do those kind of tools are dealing with things where the evaluation is fairly obvious.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like you can put a
hole in the
laser
right place.
output and you can tell exactly if the piece was cut right. And
Sure.
you're better at it. The tricky part, and the reason I still keep a little bit of a skeptical eye on all this stuff is, okay, great. So we have masses of data that go through this stuff.
Yes.
Who's really saying it's right? And even if it's right in the benchmark evaluation, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right in production in a corporation or some other entity. Because there's just a lot of subtlety here. So I think it's interesting and it could be really important, but that semantic layer is really, really important. We just don't know enough yet to really make a judgment.
And for those in the audience, remember that Tim was the guy who fixed the Obamacare website from being miserable.
Well, that's a stretch, but let's say I was
running it, right? You're the guy you're the pro from Dover, man. When the thing was not doing so well, they called you. So
I was. Yep. That's it. Yeah, me and Obama were like this.
No, I'm not saying that. You guys, you're improved.
I'm joking. Yeah, it was an important event.
Yeah, of course. Tim's too modest. Anyway, so yeah, super important. I just think it's going to be interesting. Big stack game of LLM poker. Go for it, Ankash.
So this one from Sarah Tevil. So she is a VC and she talks about this LLMs, the competition as a big game of poker.
Yeah, kind of a fun analysis. I put it as optional. It's amateur day at the investment analysis table. To mix metaphors. There's nothing here about there's nothing here about the time frame or the volatility in these investments. It is a big number being laid down. We're talking about the reconfiguration of the cognitive layer of the global economy. $600 billion on $100 trillion global economy doesn't strike me as a big number. The nature of investing is that there's going to be losses in the
and that's annual, isn't it, John?
The 600 billion?
No, the 100 trillion.
The 100 trillion is annually, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So this is 600 billion of capex over some period of time, right?
Yeah. I mean,
100 trillion every year.
Exactly. And so it's real. Let's say the proper amortization schedule is about 4 years. So let's say it's 120 billion a year, 125 billion. So the 125 billion on 100 trillion, that's less than 0.1%. So, sorry, it's a little more. It's less than 0.2%. So it's really in the context of the global economy, it's really a trivial investment.
Right.
So anyway, optional, fun. I mean, think of it as poker. Sure, why not? There's a new
I think there's exactly. It's a kind of an interesting take on it, and it's a correct analysis of behavior. But there are some striking assumptions that I wish somebody would dig into here that nobody's dug into deeply yet on the economic side. Like, we're assuming this will be like search, as opposed to cloud. So in cloud, we have an oligopoly where 3 to 10 players split up the market, and 3 players relatively dominate. But that's 3, which is a lot more than 1, as there is in search and as there was in personal computer operating systems. That makes enormous differences in the ROI, right? Yeah. And so right now, everybody's playing as if it's going to be search. And so they're willing to invest any amount of money because they're assuming they get, Brian Arthur's kind of increasing returns of information markets model where they'll get 90+% of the market. That's not at all clear to me. I don't know if it's wrong, but I don't know that it's right. So there's just lots of interesting issues so it's a correct description of what everybody's doing. Everybody's just anteing up and continuing to ante up. And then there's all the people who say that OpenAI won't be able to raise money. So we'll see about that part as well. We don't know how long the capital will go to, especially to new companies. We know the big guys have infinite capital because they generate so much cash, effectively infinite. So, we'll see. Mm-hmm.
All right. Got a big optional on this guy. I want to go back a bit, and Vivek has, just before we get to the last article here, noted that the 3 articles before the poker article together are dealing with an emerging concept, synthetic data, fine-tuning, smaller task, production highlight, and plus production. I agree, Vivek. It's an interesting set of combinations. I don't know, Adam, if you had any thoughts on this point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's smelling a lot like these compound systems or whatever, this intelligent architecture that we're talking about. Starting to evolve here, right? When you put all that together, that's how it's looking like that's what's playing out, right?
Yeah, amazing, and acceleration of learning, understanding, and return. So thanks for that, appreciate it. All right, Ankash, take us to the last one here.
The last one comes from Microsoft, and Microsoft has launched Pi 3.5 set of models, which are claiming to beat Google, OpenAI, and some more models.
All right, Paul, what do you think of the emerging munchkins here?
Yeah, the munchkins are coming. It's a product announcement. It's optional, but certainly, again, shows more of the investment that some of the larger players are putting in smaller models, which, I and others find is a promising trend to watch in 2025. Optional for today, though.
Yeah, I think, and different kinds, right? Some image, some language. I think it's kind of fun. They're struggling. I think Microsoft's struggling to decrease their dependence on OpenAI. This is part of that. But Adam, what do you think? What we got here? You're on mute, I believe.
Yeah, no, this was added late. I was out and I didn't get a chance to look through it. I couldn't tell whether it was saying that basically at all 3 sizes it was beating most of the foundational models out there at that size. Was this basically like a new leaderboard in 3 classes kind of thing? Still optional news. I'm just trying to sort of understand the scope of it.
It was more specific than that, and a lot of cherry picking, I would say, is what it looked like.
So just trying to show that they're right there with the Joneses.
Yeah. In some cases, right, and that's pretty impressive given the size of these models that they compete with any of the seriously large models. So it's very impressive, and this model's been under development in Microsoft research for a couple of years now, and I think it's optional. I think the bigger there are 2 things of interest. One is they used Mistral models as part of it, as part of their mixture of experts. And the other is, to your point, John, this is a clear move to move to get them away from dependence on OpenAI. And if I were Sam Altman, I wouldn't be happy about this at all, because they also released it with a serious open source license, so almost no restrictions.
Yeah.
So again, right now it's competitive at point specific issues with a GPT 4.0 kind of thing, but not super competitive across the board. But you know, this is what was it, Clayton Christensen's thing, right? Is you start with these little inroads where people aren't paying attention, and before you know it, they're taking over the world. So we'll see.
All righty. So we're going optional here, but very interesting trend. Ankash, get us a tote board. Gentlemen, any announcements or anything? Any important things for our audience to hear? I know we're a little over time, so I want to keep it short.
I mean, and one thing I will like to share, if anyone's on the audience can contact me, we are definitely looking at and trying to get more precise on estimates for market share by closed source vendor and market share by open source. So people know good research out there. We haven't seen it. We got some of our own, but it is high of interest right now.
All right. Light reading day. We got one important in terms of real results from generative AI from our friends at McKinsey, and the rest optional. I hope this has been helpful in your reading. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thanks. Bye-bye now.